Hi, this is Heidi from Garden Crossings, and I've had such great reviews off of the garden tour I did at my house with everything waking up that I thought, you know what, let's do it at the greenhouse as well. But before we go and do the garden tour, I wanted to talk to you about some really wonderful garden boots that I just got from Hisea. And so let's just take a quick talk about these, and I want to show you what's really cool about them. So I was really glad when they contacted me and asked me if I would trial these boots. Number one, I know doing these garden tours, especially this time of year, things are a little bit sloppy. So this is actually nicer than going out in my tennis shoes, getting them all gross. But the one thing I wanted to show you with these boots is I got the black boots. They come in a lot of different colors, but these are specifically their garden boots. Don't mind the capris, you know, it's going to be warm today. Fashion forward, not a big deal to me, but I love these boots. So they're a great garden boot. They're waterproof, and the really neat thing is right now they have this nice black outer, but look how cool this is. You can fold them over, and they have this beautiful floral pattern. So for us gardeners, I mean, it's the little things, right? And I think that that's just one additional cool little thing with these boots, is giving them a little fold over there and adding a lot of extra interest. So let's do it with this one as well, so I don't look dorky and half put together as we're walking through the garden. Again, the brand is Hisea, and we're going to actually have a code for you where you can get 15% off if you order these online. So we'll put the link below in the comments so you can go ahead and get them ordered. Use the discount code Garden Crossings, and you'll be having these on your feet just as soon as you get them ordered. They are very comfortable too. They're not only just fashionable, they're super comfortable. So waterproof, comfort, and the cute little design, I think just really put these boots on the map as far as a really fun garden boot. They do have a lot of different styles available, so if you like a taller boot or a shorter shoe boot, they have those as well. So you can just head over to the website and check them out. So let's get walking through the garden and talking about some of the different things that are currently going on in the garden bed. Our gardeners have been here and they've gone through pretty much all the beds and have done any trimming that's needed to be done, as well as any weeding that's needed to be done. So the reason I wanted to head out here at the greenhouse in these beds is because let's go check out these plants out in the front. So when I drove in this morning, the first thing I noticed were these bright splashes of orange. And I kind of had forgotten what was planted in here. So that's why I wanted to come out and take a look. These here are the candy corn spireas, just starting to put their foliage on for the season. So their new growth is this beautiful orangish red color. And then as the season emerges and as it gets warmer, it's going to turn to a really bright yellow. And then the new growth on the plants is going to have the little red tips. But as it's emerging here, gorgeous, gorgeous color. Let's also take a walk around to the back of the bed and see what else is going on. One thing I will point out is this bed was planted, I think this has been here, I think this is year 2. These here are this is the wee white hydrangea, and you can see how far this was trimmed back. It was trimmed back to about 12 to 18 inches, and it is starting to put on some little sprouts for the spring. The Invincible series are a smooth hydrangea, and they bloom off of the new growth, so if you trim them in the fall or in the spring, you don't worry about them. You're going to get blooms because they bloom off of the new growth. Other plants to take a look at here, Caryopteris Beyond Midnight. This was trimmed last fall, and that's trimmed down to about 18 inches or so. Again, these are younger plants, so they weren't super huge to start with, but that is how far we've trimmed the Caryopteris back. Up at the top of the berm here, we have some of the pugster butterfly bushes, and these were trimmed back to about 12 inches tall. Here in Michigan, we like to usually wait until the spring to do the trimming on the butterfly bushes. We just kind of leave all that old there for the winter, just gives a little extra protection. And in the spring, we come back and do any trimming if we feel like trimming is needed. Also up here at the top, this is an Atlas rose. This was trimmed back to about 12 inches or so. And you can see how that's starting to nicely sprout for the spring. So that's going to be a wonderful, wonderful bloomer all summer long. We have some daylilies that are starting to poke through. The daylilies, we trim them back in the fall all the way to the ground. And then this is the new growth that's going on. If you have daylilies and you feel like they're starting to maybe not put on as many blooms as what they have in the past, and your clumps are just huge, go ahead and get in there and dig those babies up, split them up, and put them in other areas of your garden, or just kind of thin them out a little bit. Sometimes daylilies do need a little bit of a thinning to continue to really give you the large amount of blooms that you might be looking for. Here we have our hardy hibiscus, and this was trimmed back to, these are about 10 or 12 inches tall or so. So this is just gonna get ready to bloom for this year. If you wanted to, you could definitely trim this back to the base, like all the way down to the ground. The new growth on a hardy hibiscus comes from the soil level. All of this, there's nothing gonna come off of this stuff. So this just really, we could trim this back all the way and not need to worry about having all that ugliness going on there. Two plants that really stood out for winter interest this past winter are the Arctic Fire Cornus. So this was, it's a newer plant, but I wanted the red twig dogwood, so I have some winter interest. I'll also use these twigs, I'll cut them and use them in my winter pots. So that is Arctic Fire Red. And then this one here is the Arctic Fire Yellow. So a yellow twig dogwood, and you can see how nice and vibrant the yellow sticks are here. So this too would be really a nice plant to use for winter cuttings. So red and yellow, and then we did another red over here just to kind of balance out the back side here of the berm. Along our river birch here, we had a planting of the, let's see here, these are gem box, strong box. These here are strong box. So these are evergreen shrubs, and they've made it through the winter quite nicely. Just a little bit here of maybe some frost damage from, it got warm and then it got cold, but I'm not worried about that. It'll green up and new leaves will come, so those will look really nice here around this beautiful river birch. The nice thing I do like about the birch is if you look at it, just look at how the bark here is just kind of peeling and blowing in the breeze. So these trees have a lot of interest to them. Even when they're not in flower, they've got the great white twigs, and then this peely look here is really neat as well. So this tree will get pretty big as it matures. Usually I think they look nicer when they're younger, and when they get old they kind of start to look a little So, but it takes a while to get to the part, so we'll enjoy it while it's looking like it is right now. All right, let's head over to another garden bed. The bed we're at now is bordering our parking lot, and right now the majority of the color is coming through a few hyacinths that we put in here, some bulbs that we had transplanted from the front of the garden center before we did all the construction. We just moved the bulbs over here. So they're really blooming nicely and giving us a little bit of color along the edge of the parking lot. Other things to point out is this here is an ornamental cherry called Zuzu, and this is starting to put its foliage on. And there's also just a little bit of bud starting here, so this will be flowering shortly with some beautiful pink flowers. Behind Zuzu we have the new Jacob's ladder there, and that too, it's starting to put on, there's a lot of foliage, but it's starting to put on its buds. So that should be flowering probably in a couple weeks or so, I'm thinking. So my original thought was in this bed is that like the columbine would be the first thing to flower up, but there's actually a few other things that I think are going to bloom before the columbine. We have some creeping phlox here that's putting on a little bit of flower. That's a little bit early. We've got oriental poppies starting to poke up there a little bit. We planted a bunch of monarda, and you can hardly see it because it's almost blending in with the black there, but a lot of the monarda is starting to come up too, so this is going to be really a lovely patch of bee balm or monarda once it starts to bloom. On the trellis here we've got the pugster butterfly bush, and again you can see how far back we've trimmed it. Clematis, we got to get this guy going on the trellis so it goes up instead of around. So we'll kind of just tuck that in and around there and let it make its way up. This here is opening act phlox that's starting to emerge. This was a planting of 5 plants, and you can see how it does a little bit of spreading, but it's still staying pretty contained to the area that we planted it in. Bartzilla peony, that is a huge clump of Bartzilla there. That is going to be gorgeous once it starts flowering with its extra large yellow blooms. As we walk along, what do we got here? Not sure what that is. It's not a clematis. It's a shrub of some sort, so we'll see as it makes its way along. We've got some of the paint the town phlox up here, so they're starting to green up. And not phlox, paint the town dianthus. So those will be blooming here in the summer. We've got our incredible hydrangea. Some more butterfly bush there, another hydrangea. Butterfly bush. So we kind of have this garden a little bit mirror image, sort of, with the big hydrangea in the middle, and then we kind of work off of that so the sides are kind of symmetrical. We're not totally symmetrical here, but try to keep it a little bit symmetrical. In the back there are some allium serendipity. Those will be great bloomers midsummer. Here's another candy corn spirea just starting to emerge with that really bright orangey red foliage. So that's really a great plant to give you that early spring color in the form of foliage color. And as we head through here, a lot of repeats with the allium, the Bartzilla, the opening act phlox, another clematis that we got to get trained up the trellis. Actually, we might need to get another trellis or wait till this gets just a little taller. So on this particular trellis, what I like to do, or I guess it's more of an obelisk, what I like to do is put 2 different clematises on one unit, because if one's not blooming, my hope is that another one will be blooming. So on here we have pink mink and also diamond ball, and I know that they bloom at different times, so this should always have a little bit of color going on. So don't be afraid to mix clematis when you're planting them on a structure, because that'll just help make sure that your structure will be in bloom a lot longer. Another Atlas rose, that one's a little bit more mature than what we were out in the other garden bed. Some lupine are starting to come up, along with some salvia. So it's really fun to watch as these things come back every year, and it's just fun as they keep poking through and then start coloring up. That's also when things really start to get amazing. So we're going to make our way around. This is where I'm glad I have these nice Hisea garden boots, because we're going to go mudding and get my feet dirty. So the berm we're at currently, this was just planted up last fall. So I really haven't even come out here yet to see what's going on or what's blooming or what's coming up. So this will be a first for me, as it is for you, to see how the plants have overwintered. So I'm definitely seeing like a lot of the perennials and such are starting to emerge a little bit. We've got the Virginia here. This one here is Miss Piggy, and this is starting to put on a little bit of a flower here. So that's really nice. Like I said, those are planted last fall, so not a lot of size to them yet, but it's really nice to see that they are starting to flower. As we walk along, we have the pussy willow. This is black cat, and this is I should have been out here probably 2 months ago. This is past its prime, but you can see here there's a little bit of the interest going on right now. Walking along, we have some holly that we planted. So we have Castle Wall and Castle Spire out here. These are really quite small specimens right now, but as they get taller, they'll get about 6 to 8 foot tall, and this will give us some of the winter interest in the garden here. They don't lose their leaves, so these are evergreen, and then they're going to have the beautiful red berries for winter time. Here we have some sedum. It's starting to emerge. This is Yellow Brick Road, so this will make a really nice kind of a border path here on the back side of the garden. It's windy out here and cold. I started off in my t-shirt, or my short sleeve shirt, and Lynn told me, our videographer, get a coat on. It's too cold for short sleeve. So a lot of these things are very immature yet, because like I said, they were just planted last fall. Up on the top there, we did kind of a little swoop of the sprinter boxwood. So those also will be an evergreen shrub that will give this garden a little bit of winter structure. In front of me here, I have the Miss Pearl, Miss Ruby, and Miss Violet butterfly bush. So this will be a great addition because especially with a butterfly house, we want to have as many plants in here that will attract the butterflies to the garden. So when we're planting up these beds, not only are we trying to get a lot of different variety going on, but we also want to make for sure that we have quite a lot of things in here that will attract the butterflies as well. Up on the top here, we have some of our new roses, the Rise Up roses. So Rise Up Ringo, Rise Up Amberness, and Rise Up Lilac Days. So we're really curious to see how these climbing roses do. I've never grown climbing roses before. So this will be kind of a nice new addition, something different to the garden. All right, we're going to make our way around and head to the front side of the berm. So this side of the berm, I was a little nervous about how it was going to go over the winter. We have a creek that runs, or I guess it's a drainage ditch actually, that runs between us and the farmer's field next to us. And we get a lot of rain. It kind of rises up here and floods this area. So I wasn't sure if the water would get so high that it would get into this bed. Reason is we got sedum down there, which is a drought tolerant perennial. So if that gets wet, it's not going to love the wetness. But it looks like it didn't get wet with this last rain that we got, which was pretty significant. So I think we could have it raised just enough to keep that out of the wet zone. Also, one thing I was noticing here is the Dicentra pink diamonds, which are a full sun loving Dicentra or bleeding heart. They're just starting to emerge. And I love this frilly, fluffy foliage here. It's so nice and dainty. And the thing with this Dicentra is it is amazing. It blooms all summer long. So if you're looking for a perennial that blooms all summer, this Dicentra pink diamonds is definitely a great selection. As we make the way around here, we have a whole big planting here of the Violet Riot salvia. So this will be really fun. And behind that, we did a lot of the hardy hydrangeas. So we're going to have some big, probably 6 to 8 foot hydrangeas kind of filling in the middle there just to give us some beauty on the end, a nice anchor to this garden bed. This is still a work in progress. You can see how we have the soil mounded up. What we're going to do is we're going to use some like slate rock in this area here, kind of like what we had there in the beginning of the video, just to kind of give it a little balance from this side of the property and garden to the other side of the property, just so they kind of balance off each other. So this is going to be a bunch of that slate rock here just to give a little step up into the garden. There's a lot of stakes, but things aren't coming up quite yet. Here they are though. So again, we took the candy corn spirea from the north side of the property, brought it to the south side of the property, and you can just see that beautiful spring color emerging on these plants as well. So this will kind of give us a balanced look across the whole front of the property. I'm a symmetrical person. I like symmetry. We do some pokes in here and there of things that are more random, but we're trying to create some symmetry and consistency with a lot of these new beds that we're creating. Behind the spirea, there's going to be a big drift of the Pardon My Monarda. So that'll be a nice drift of midsummer color. On this side here, we have a nice splash of creeping phlox. So this will give us some early season color. And behind this creeping phlox, it looks like there's some more tall phlox and also some coneflower, which will be great for the pollinators. In this area here, we have a planting of the yarrow. So all the different in the Firefly series. So that'll be a nice little cluster of all the different colors of the yarrow. Behind the yarrow, it kind of looks like little grasses right now, but that's Nephofia. So the Flashpoint series, or the Pyromania series. Flashpoint is one of them. So there's 5 different of the Pyromania Nephofias in there. We have another drift here of the Leucanthemum and Shasta daisies. Some more salvia and veronica. In the back there, we've created another little swoop. We had the sprinter boxwood on that end. This here is a swoop of the gem box. So this will be some evergreen color. The plants, let's see how they did. So there is a little bit of frost damage on these, and these were planted from quart-sized containers. So it's going to take a little bit for these to get to size. But this will just be a nice, really evergreen swoop going through here. Towards the end of the bank, we have some deutzia. These are cherry blossom. So these are going to be low growing shrubs, probably about 18 or so inches tall, spring blooming. And then on the end of the bed here, we anchored it again with some of the more creeping phlox for early color. And behind them, we did some of the big leaf hydrangeas. We did Let's Dance Ariba, which was one of the fastest of the Let's Dance series of hydrangeas to rebloom. So from bud to bloom, it's a quick cycle. It doesn't take all summer like some of the other big leaf hydrangeas. So really excited to watch as this bed grows and matures. And for those of you who just started following, you're going to be following this as a work in progress. With it being just a newly planted bed, you'll be able to see how the plants start off as a small, young, immature plant. And then over the years, we're going to watch them grow and watch this bed just really mature and develop. Let's head over to the waterfall fountain. So the waterfall garden is a very mature garden that's been here pretty much since we've bought the place, which was about 17 years ago. We've done a lot of changes and additions to the plants in here. So many of these plants are probably 8 or 9 years old. So there's definitely mature specimens out here. The one in the center there that you're seeing that's nicely shaped, that's a Pinky Winky hydrangea. That one got trimmed last fall to about 6 foot tall or so. It was about, oh goodness, about 10 foot tall before we trimmed it back. Some of these other larger specimens that you're seeing, those are incredible hydrangeas. They were all trimmed back to about 4 foot tall. Along the front of this bed, we have some spireas, and these were starting to get kind of a little bit woody looking and just not super great. So we trimmed these back to about 2 to 3 foot, and we're just gonna let them emerge and kind of like recreate themselves. There was just so much dead wood, and I think by trimming them back, we're going to create a lot of fresh new growth, which will get them looking fresher and nicer again this year. Behind the spirea, we have the incredible Invincible Spirit hydrangeas, and they were all trimmed back to about 3 foot tall. When we plant this garden up, we're very intentional about creating a stop someone in their tracks going 65 miles an hour, because as you can tell, there's a lot of traffic going past here, semis and such. So we really got to create a wow factor that when they're driving, they want to stop and see what we are and what we have. So once this all comes into bloom and all the flowers are planted, you can't help but turn your head and look at garden crossings. As we move along, there's some more spirea. In the back there, that is the Weigela Wine and Roses. That was trimmed back to about 4 foot tall or so. And there's a few butterfly bushes tucked behind there that were trimmed back to 18 inches. And I can see they're just starting to sprout there at the base of the plant. That's one thing in Michigan, when we grow butterfly bushes, most of the time they come back from the base, where I know for those of you in the south, your butterfly bushes will sprout off of that old growth. So it just kind of depends on where you're at as to where you're going to trim your plants. This little pond here we leave fairly natural. There's a lot of toads, or not toads, but frogs that live in here. Sometimes the cattails will come up. We try to get rid of those though, because it just makes a mess with the cattails, so we try to pull them out. But this one we leave very natural for the wildlife. And then with this one here, we created a dry pond. So this one stays a little bit cleaner, doesn't have the standing water in it. We have the rock fountain that's going off in the summer, kind of creating a bubbler with the waterfall streaming down into this dry pond. This area here is an area where we plant a lot of annuals. Myself and Ben went through and created a plan for this area, so we're excited to show you once we get it all planted what our plan was. But I can tell you that a lot of sun pations and a lot of the supertunias will be used in this area. And of course, we're going to have the sun credible sunflowers again, because we were just so happy with how that turned out last year. Just a little bit of color right now with some daffodils. We really, I think, need to get more bulbs put in here for some more spring color. But the problem is we're always digging in these gardens, planting our annuals, that we're always digging out the bulbs. So you feel like you're putting them in, taking them out. So that's why we haven't done a lot of bulbs right now. But it's kind of nice when they do poke up, just to give us a little bit of color. In this garden here, we have a drift of butterfly bush. And then we've got the Going Bananas daylilies, which are just starting to come up. And then in front of that, we're going to plant probably Pennisetum fireworks is what we have in mind for planting along the front of here, just to give it a little bit of motion here in the front of the garden. Ornamental grasses are always great because they give you that motion as the wind blows. So we use a lot of the fireworks grass. We've got a forsythia that's just starting to bloom. That's part of the Show Off series. I think that one is Show Off Starlit. It's not quite to its prime yet, but it is giving us a little bit of color. Some more of the Pennisetum grasses, those were trimmed back in the fall. If you have grasses in your garden and it's safe to do so, I'm going to say this, safe to do so, on a non-windy day, you can burn them up. So light them up and burn them down to the base. But I do need to make for sure that I say, make sure it's not windy. Make sure you have a hose handy, that if they do get out of control, you can hose them down. And make sure they're not by a structure, because obviously if you've got grasses next to your house, do not burn them, just trim them. This here is Hisea Little Henry. And this started off here as one plant, and you can see Little Henry kind of sends out its little friends. This has really filled off this corner nicely. Little Henry is a great plant because it can be grown in full sun to full shade. It's spring flowers, so you got beautiful spring flowers, but then in the fall you get vibrant reddish orange foliage. So multi-season of interest. If you can plant any plant that has multi-seasons of interest, that's always a bonus. And that's what the Hisea Little Henry does in this garden. This here is a firelight hydrangea, and it was trimmed back to about 4 foot in the fall. I can see that there's little buds starting to emerge. So this is starting to wake up here from the winter. So that's always fun to see that fresh new growth. Along the front here, we have a bunch of Shasta daisies, some columbine, and a bunch of baptisia. None of them, well, actually the baptisia is starting to emerge. It's black, so you can't see it. But if we look in here, you can see the baptisia is just starting to come up. So when baptisia gets shipped out, there's usually maybe 1 to 3 stalks. So it's pretty immature when it gets shipped out. But this here has been in here 3 years, and you can see all that new growth. So once they get in the ground, they do start to send up quite a few new shoots after that first year. It's just the first year they're a little bit slower to start. So a lot of spring color in the form of baptisia in this garden as well. Hopefully you enjoyed taking this tour with me through the gardens here at the greenhouse. If you're new to Garden Crossings channel, be sure to subscribe. And anything we've talked about today, you can shop online at gardencrossings.com. We're a mail order company, so we ship all of our plants across the United States. And for those of you who are local here to Zeeland, Michigan, or who like to take a drive, we do have our retail garden center that is usually open from April through October. Thank you for following along today. This is Heidi from Garden Crossings.